Scotia, thanks so much for coming here to be on the Creative Kind podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. As many listeners may not know, we're cousins. Fun little fact here. Yeah, that's real. A lot of people probably going to listen to this one. It's going to be family, so they wouldn't know that. So for people who aren't familiar with who you are or what you do, talk to me a little bit about your talk to me a little bit about your profession and the latest project that you've been working on.
Okay, so I'm a film makeup artist. I've been working in film as a makeup artist for I think this will be the 8th year. In the Toronto area, I'm in a union, IATSE 873. And right now I'm working on Titans. My last show was Jupiter's Legacy that finished, and then there was a long break, obviously, over COVID. I had a lot of time off. So my last show was Jupiter's Legacy. It comes out May 7th. I'm so excited.
Amazing. Congratulations. And Jupiter's Legacy, that's premiering on Netflix. Is that correct?
Yeah. Netflix on May 7th.
Okay. So that's one thing that I think is quite impressive, that you've had a quite large roster with working with like different Netflix shows. You've done some things with Disney. At what point did you think that like things started to kind of take off and you started to get more and more consistent work? Was it really when you joined a union? Was that like kind of a big breakthrough to access larger and larger projects?
Definitely, it's very, very helpful if you can do it. It was pretty hard. I still got in pretty young, but it felt like a major accomplishment to get into the union. And I felt like after, like, that was my goal. I didn't think that it would happen quite so early, but after that I was like, okay, I'm set. I don't need to worry anymore. I was still getting to know people then within the union, and you still have to be like picked or name hired onto a show, even though you're a member. It doesn't just happen automatically. Like for different shows, the head of department, the head of the makeup department, who's hired by a producer, has to ask you to join their team. So after I joined the union, which was maybe 4 years ago, it took maybe a year or so after that for people to start really getting to know. I mean, it's still happening. Like there are a lot of people that I haven't worked with before, but now it's pretty steady. I've been so lucky that ever since I started when I was 20, it's been booming. Like last year, even though COVID shut everything down in March and then didn't start up until September, that was the biggest year for film in Toronto ever. The year before that, which would have been 2018, was the biggest year for film. I think I heard it did like 2 billion, and then it did 2.4 billion during the year of COVID when we were off for 5 months. And now we're set to do 4 billion this year because all of those shows now are going back to back. Like everything was pushed back. So now, say for Titans, they may do, I haven't heard anything yet, but a lot of shows will do 2 seasons back to back with like a month off, which would have normally happened over the course of 2 years. So they need people like crazy. It's a lot easier now to get into the union than it was even when I started. And then 20 years ago, they would let like 5 people in once every 4 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I wouldn't have thought it would be such a challenge to get into the union.
I know.
Because a union is like, like the more people in it, the stronger the union is.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's cool as well when you talk about the power of, say, the relationships that you've built on different series, and then that gives one thing leads to another, kind of they invite you on the next show or something they're working on. Have you found that having those relationships, like, has that also been kind of a key to your growth, your professional and personal growth, is building strong relationships in your sector?
100%. And the thing is that we work so closely with each other. Like the days are so long. They're normally 12-hour days minimum, with your team of makeup artists on crazy locations. So you spend so much time together, and then you're working at like stations next to each other in a trailer for months. So people say it's like 50% of your skill as a makeup artist and 50% your personality. Like, do they want to be around you? Are you positive? Like it can be tough. It sounds silly, but some of the locations that we go to sometimes, and then I think probably the hardest thing is working exterior night shoots in the winter. Like it can be really, really tough. People don't think about that, like, because I'm a makeup artist, but it's hard work sometimes. So they want people that are going to be nice to be around, and then you have to have a certain personality too to work with the cast. Like you're working on their faces. It's so personal. They're very vulnerable. You're doing their face for camera, so they have to trust you, and you do have to have a certain personality type and build those relationships so that either the cast want to have you around and have you back, your boss wants to have you around and know that they can trust you, and it's all word of mouth. Like we're contract workers, so every single job it's nothing is guaranteed. It's not like you just get hired and then you work at a company and it takes a lot to fire you. Nobody has to fire you. They just don't have to hire you back.
Yeah.
So they can say goodbye to you in 1 or 2 months and then hire someone else. And the word of mouth gets around like crazy. Like I get hired because whoever my boss has been will talk to their friends and then they hire me. It's a pretty, like, everybody knows everyone. It's a pretty small industry.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I want to dive a bit deeper and then kind of take, because even what you're talking about the growth in Toronto, like I want to come back to that. But but for doing when you talk about like how you have to like literally do their faces, and I know you do as well, like prosthetics in terms of like gore and wounds and things like that. Is that still kind of your expertise, or have you moved more into just like all around, all kind of makeup, depending on the series, or do you still do a lot of like the graphic stuff as well?
I think it depends on
like the show.
It definitely depends on the show that I'm on. And I think slowly I'm getting to the point where, like, before a couple of years ago when I first started, someone asked me if I wanted to work on a show, like I would say yes, like, because I didn't have very many options. And now slowly, now that more people are getting to know me and are requesting me, I'm trying to pick shows where I can use my skills more and stay practiced more. Like some of the shows are very, let's say it's like a cop show or something like that. It's very no makeup. So day after day, you're doing these totally normal makeup looks on people that are supposed to be playing everyday people. So their makeup doesn't even change, just like everyday people. Like they're not trying new fun things all the time. And that had been, now it's all about superhero shows, it seems, which is really fun, and you get to do a lot of cool stuff. But for a while, just because of the work that was available, I think that the steadiest work was doing those everyday straight makeup looks. There are a lot of amazingly talented people that just focus on prosthetics. And they can be super busy too, but you kind of have to be more of an expert. For me,
for sure.
Yeah, for me, the steadiest work has just been like the regular makeup, and then we get to do fun things. Like they always ask for like black eyes and cuts and like easier things like that.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a mix of everything for me at this point.
Nice. That's cool. So yeah, because I feel like making like the limbs and all that stuff, like that's like a whole other like department.
Yeah, and so they do that stuff every day. They work mostly in a shop, so they're not on set. And then they'll come, and then how that works is like shows don't need that stuff all the time. So they'll ask for, if that comes up in a script, they'll ask the prosthetics people to come out and do that like a couple days a month. And although I could have gone that route, I just prefer I wanted to be on a show and not be doing like day jobs here and there. So that's how, I just ended up doing less prosthetics that way.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, so it makes me think, right? Like, because a lot of the shoots that I do as a videographer are just like, corporate videos, they are one-off, working with nonprofits as well. But you're on like massive sets, right?
Yeah.
Like Netflix productions. So when you watch TV and things like this, has it kind of changed the way has it changed a bit of your perception of reality somewhat when you
totally? And it's funny that you say, it's funny that you said reality, because the one thing for sure is watching reality TV shows like, say, The Hills back in the day, rewatching that and thinking like, they definitely, this whole interaction that they're having, they had more than once, because if there was a camera there, you would have seen it in the, like, I just have a better sense of the camera setups and how they film things. Like, I remember on my very first movie set, we spent like hours doing one scene. So the actors were saying the same lines over and over and over and over again. Even like, I knew that they would have to say it more than once to get the right take, but it's like they set up the cameras here. There's 2 cameras. They get that, they get the master, the wide, and then they move the camera. Say there were like the first movie that I did, there were 8 main characters. It was like in an old house. It was a scary movie. So they find some abandoned house. There's 8 high school students. Then they'll move the cameras and focus on 2 of them separately. Say everybody says all the lines again. Then they move the cameras to focus on 2 more people. Everybody says all the same lines again. I always pictured that there would be like however many cameras needed, getting it all at the same time, not like, not that you have to stop, do it with a separate camera. So it changed reality TV for me, because I'm like, you can't fit 2 cameras like at opposite angles like that. So they obviously reenacted this moment. And I always look at the background. I find it kind of funny. I always notice the background when I'm watching TV. It's because they're not allowed to speak, because it would ruin the sound for the actors acting.
So there's like mouthing, essentially.
So they're mouthing, but they're still trying to have conversations. Oh, sorry. One sec. They're still trying to have conversations with each other to keep it real, I guess, in the background of the scene. So they'll mouth things, but really dramatically, so that they can understand each other still, even though they're not speaking. So when you watch TV, they're just like in the background.
Exaggerated.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Interesting. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Yeah. And
even like whenever you watch a club scene where it's like really, really loud, people are dancing, you assume that people are drinking, like those all happen silently. So that you can hear if the 2 main actors are having like a close conversation, whispering to each other, and it seems like everybody's dancing and partying around them, like they're all dancing, but they have to do it without music.
Yeah, and it probably happens at that point as like all that music and everything's mixed in after and post.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's cool. What would you say for as a piece of advice for, say, other anyone else who's considering getting into the film sector, who wants to take like a professional route that you did as a makeup in the makeup sector? What would you say a piece of advice that like now that you kind of wish you knew before you started?
So I'm trying to remember back. I think I waited a little bit long. I think that this is just how life goes in general. Like if you want something, take that step. Like don't wait and don't think that you're not ready yet. Like there's no harm in just trying. I remember you have to become a permittee of the union to be allowed to work on sets before you get hired as a member. And I always thought, even though I had been working in film for a couple of years, I thought, oh, I don't have enough yet. Like, I don't have all of the requirements necessary to apply, even as a permittee. But it's just been so busy, and way busier now even than then. I filled it out and sent it in, like, even without all of the requirements that they asked for, and I got accepted as a permittee, which is the first step. You have to do that. So I would say right now it's so busy. You have to have gone to school, but whatever experience you have, write it down in a way that's going to make it seem like it can apply to working on a set, and apply, because I see sometimes people come out on shows and it's like, this is their first time on a show ever. Which I didn't know, which is fine. Obviously everyone starts somewhere, but like, it's a pretty big deal to start on a big union set. So I would say just go for it, get all of your stuff in and apply, and then go in, pay attention, listen to what's going on. It's like, you really do, you can't get too distracted when you're on set, because you'll miss things. Like, no one's going to be holding your hand, babysitting you, and coming to you and saying, okay, like, let's say you get hired as a daily makeup artist, you'll probably be doing background first, making sure that all of the background look good, and then it's your responsibility to maintain them throughout the day. But you're going to look silly if you're going to touch up a background person that's like 100 feet away from the camera. So you don't want to get in anybody's way, but you need to kind of keep an ear out and keep an eye out for what the shots are, see what the camera is seeing, and then go in and work as necessary. And you have to be paying attention to do that. Sometimes people just, they wander off and they think that someone's going to tell them, like, go and do that. So I would say stay quiet and try to keep an ear out for what's going on set, because it's changing like crazy. You just have to kind of be on the sidelines and listen to everything that's going on around you.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And well, it makes me wonder as well, something I wanted to kind of come back to here.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about the union, and like like you mentioned, like, you've been with the union for 4 years, but you've been doing things in the film sector for longer than that. Is that the only way? Like, what's the benefit really of joining the union? And do you see people on set who aren't part of the union? Like, how many unions are there in the industry?
Okay, so I'm going to say something that may be offensive to some people, maybe controversial. We actually have, this is just how I feel. We have 2 unions in Canada. I don't think it's the same way in the United States. The one that I'm in, IATSE, is an international union, so they do have it in the States. We have one called NABET, 2. There are so many like amazing people that work for that union, so I feel scared to say it, but I do think it's silly that we have 2 unions. I'm very pro-union in any industry. I think that it protects workers from being taken advantage of, and basically the whole point is that all of the workers in a particular industry are standing together and agreeing to a bottom, like a base rate of pay that they're willing to work for, and you all kind of agree to that. You agree not to undercut each other so that you're being paid a wage that you want. That's the point of a union. But then we have another union that works for less than us. So
that's the like Canadian only union, essentially.
I believe so, and they're not specific just to film. Like there's a film section of it, but I think they do some other industries as well.
Interesting.
So we do have 2. Most of the American television and features, well, probably all of them, come with IATSE, and then Canadian television does come to IATSE as well. I guess it just depends on the budget, or the crew. Sometimes producers have already worked with certain crews that are in one of the unions, so they'll either go to NABET or IATSE. But NABET, their scale, like you could see it if you go online, their base rate of pay is less than ours. And maybe it's a good thing because they can get the lower budget shows that maybe can't afford to be an IATSE show, but there are still certain standards and rules put into place for those smaller budget shows. I guess that's why they have it.
Would a large production ever have people from both? Like, would you?
No, you can't. It's part of the rules from those. Well, it's IATSE rules. You could have a member that's a permittee with IATSE. You could have a member from NABET come and work on an IATSE show, but they wouldn't be. You can't be a member of both. You can have like a one-time permittee status for a particular show. I know it seems like kind of complicated.
Yeah, so it's
but yeah, we do have 2 unions, and then we have non-union work as well. I think it's definitely in your best interest to join IATSE rather than, like, everybody has to start in non-union, but you make less, you work more, you don't get the support that you like. They're just lower budget shows, so they don't have enough money to hire like the whole team that you need. Sometimes you're doing 2 people's jobs. Like in the union, they separate hair from makeup, but in non-union, they hire you for both.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and it's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. And when we come, I wanted to kind of take a step back and let's talk about the sector at large. Where do you, I mean, we talked about how this year we're already on track to almost double what last year's record was.
Yeah.
That's Toronto specifically, right?
I believe so. Like, this is just something that I heard on set, but I don't know all the numbers on this.
Yeah, okay, like we can fact check. But I mean, just roughly speaking, without, putting a number to it, the scale and the speed in which the film and movie sector is growing is just like accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you see this as do you see this as a cause because of the interest in streaming platforms? Because I know you're working on Netflix shows. Do you think that's really spirited, or do you think it's just a natural progression of, our reliance on media? Like, what do you think is really causing that growth?
I would say streaming, and how quickly we take in the content these days. Like, you binge a show in 1 or 2 nights, and production companies are just trying to keep up with the need,
the demand. Yeah.
Especially during COVID, like that's all people are doing. In a way, it is essential. Like, the arts and entertainment, you really do need that stuff in your life. Especially when everybody's stuck at home. It's amazing that film has been able to adapt, even though movie theaters are kind of going down. And they've just kind of like changed it over, and like Blockbuster's gone, but they've changed it over to streaming, and it's booming.
So yeah, walk me through right now, like in terms of COVID precautions, like how is that working on a set? Like, I think you mentioned that you guys, everyone has to get like, swabbed daily or something like this, right?
Yeah. So the turnaround, it used to be 4 times a week. Now we get tested 3 times a week because in the beginning they had an issue with the turnaround from the lab. And they need to make sure, like, they need to get those tests back consistently to keep us in cadence. Like in the beginning, it was kind of touch and go. Like, certain people couldn't show up to work because that test, even though we get tested 3 times a week, that test didn't come back in time. So we get tested 3 times a week. I'm pretty sure that the results come like the very next day or that night. And it depends. Sorry. It depends on how, basically what they do is the cast can't wear masks to act. If we're pretending like this is not a pandemic world in the film that we're like, you could.
Which is probably all the time, yeah.
So the cast don't wear masks to pretend like this is not COVID. And then they basically, you get tested based on how close you have to come into contact with the performers that are not wearing masks. The performers also get tested 3 or 4 times a week. Makeup artists have to wear the most PPE and get tested at the same amount as the cast because we're so close to them. And we basically dress like we're like, well, you have to treat it like everybody has COVID. So we wear the blue gowns, face shields, and a KN95.
Wow.
Yeah. And then just like sanitizing everything like crazy. We also have separate, like normally on a show, we could kind of interchange the cast that we were working on and say like, okay, Scotia, you go to set and watch my actor while I'm in the trailer doing makeup on my next actor coming in. And we would kind of switch them off like that. But now we keep everybody, they call it like pods and micro pods. So we try to limit the people that we come into contact with, because as per the laws of Ontario, if you are within like close contact, so if you're within 6 feet of someone for longer than 15 minutes, you would have to self-isolate for 14 days. So if you think about a set, like everybody coming together during filming, that could, if one person gets COVID, it could shut everything down. Everybody has to go home for 14 weeks. So we've split it up into all these little pods, and you don't go up and talk to someone within 6 feet of them that's not in your, normally there would be kind of like a social aspect, you know, you talk to people that aren't in your, that you work with that aren't in your department. And now you just kind of stick to, you have to stay next to certain cast that we've divided up between the makeup artists. I don't go close to the other makeup artists in case I have to self-isolate, then it's not both of us, like then it's not the makeup team.
Doesn't ruin the whole entire production. Yeah.
Wow. So that's and then now we take like rotating lunches so that it's not like they don't call a lunch break now where the entire crew gets together in one room. It's all spaced out and like everything's just sanitized like crazy, and it's been going. We know that we're not spreading COVID because everyone's getting tested. True. So we're all getting those negative results back. Well,
that's good. I'm happy to hear that, you know, you're able to work and things are still going on. So the next question, kind of few wrapping things up here, but I wanted to just quickly touch upon your origin story. I know you got started a lot doing film and doing makeup up north in Sudbury. So what were some of the first kind of shoots that you did in the film sector? Like what was like the first project that you did, and was that in Sudbury or outside of Sudbury?
Okay, so it was in Sudbury, and I never thought, like, I grew up in Sudbury, moved to Toronto thinking, you know, to pursue my job as a makeup artist.
Shout out to the Boyd family.
Never thought. So about 2 years after I went away to go to makeup school, I ended up back in Sudbury to do a movie up there in the summer. Never thought that would happen, that my first film would be back in North Ontario, but they actually have this whole separate tax credit. It's for the arts, not just for film. It's called the North Ontario Heritage Fund. So shows will actually go there for additional tax benefits. And it's so helpful. Like, yes, they get tax credits from the government, but it brings so much money. Like all of those Northern Ontario locals are working. Sometimes the people that they do bring from Toronto, they put them up in hotels. They're eating at local restaurants. They're going out on the weekends. They're shopping for wardrobe for the show, like spending so much money on that, you know, at the stores in the area. So it really does bring in so much money, even though it comes from tax dollars. Like, it really does benefit the community, in my opinion. So I started there, and basically what ended up happening was, after a few years or a couple of years of working up there, makeup artists from Toronto in the beginning would be hired as head of department, and I would assist them as a local up there. so I was getting to know them, and then eventually they would hire me in Toronto. So that's how I got started. But my first show was called Lost After Dark. I made $100 a day, working 12 hours. So it's less than minimum wage. So it's like, that's why. But I loved it. Like, to me, as my first job, that was amazing. Like, I would have done it for free. It was so
totally.
cool. It was so much fun. It was like, I still liked the money at that point, because like the hours
you're passionate about, right? Like,
and like it was like 6 days a week for 12 hours. So it's like, I was working like crazy, but it was still a good amount of money to me at that time. So I didn't care. I was like, this is sweet. But that's why that goes against even labor laws in Ontario. But that's why you want to work up to union shows.
Totally. Yeah, that's super cool. And kind of on that point there, like on top of giving back to the economy, like filming in Northern Ontario is just beautiful, right?
Oh, totally.
Like, there's so many draws, for production sets to go up there. So just final few questions here. Where can people connect with you if they want to look at some of the work you've done, or follow? They just want to reach out to you. Maybe it's a potential producer who's looking to bring on a makeup artist on their team. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you, Scotia?
So I do have a website, scotiaboyd.com, that has my email address on it. And then my Instagram is something that I update all the time with my most recent work. That's Scotia Boyd Makeup on Instagram.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. And was there anything else, like any other, we mentioned Jupiter's Legacy. What other things is there any other thing you want to kind of give airspace to, or is there anything that we haven't had a chance to speak about yet that you were hoping to chat about coming into this?
I think everybody, I'm so excited about Jupiter's Legacy. I think everybody should watch that just for themselves. Like, I was a small part of a large team, but it's going to be such a cool show. And then, Titans I'm working on right now. That'll be out, I think at the end of the summer. That's on Netflix as well.
And that's a new season though, right? Like Titans has been out.
Yeah, Titans has been out. This is the 3rd season. Nice. I worked a little bit on season 2, which is already on Netflix. That's another fun superhero show that you can watch.
Sweet. Okay. And we'll definitely check those out, and I'll put some reminders in the copy for this when it's published.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alex.
Of course. This was fun. And so last question here for you, Scotia. What does creativity mean to you?
I've been thinking about this because I was actually worried about the questions that you might ask me. I don't view myself as that creative, even though I'm sure that I am. To me, it's just honing your, I guess, no matter what it is you want to do. If you're a painter, like nobody has those skills naturally. You can be naturally creative, and you can pick it up easily, but you have to work at it no matter what it is. So for me as a makeup artist, I have to continue to keep the products are always changing. There are new techniques and skills that people are generous enough to teach. So you have to keep going to those courses. You have to keep reading and keep using new products to grow. To me, being a makeup artist didn't come, even though I loved it. You really have to learn and continue to grow every year and practice.
Yeah, totally. Do you sometimes look back at like your first shows or something and be like, oh God, what was I thinking?
Totally. Like, I thought I was so good back then. Like, I'm happy that I was so confident, but like.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Scotia. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I really appreciate
thanks,
your
Alex.
time. And I just want to acknowledge all the great work that you're doing in the film sector and with your makeup art, and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks for having me.